So Wave 4 of the Mario Kart Booster Course Pass just dropped, and I gotta say, I am super impressed. I'm sure countless people have said this now, but Nintendo really seems to be upping their game with each new wave, and this one is no exception. There are some amazing tracks in this lineup, and it's probably the most consistent set of courses we've had so far. To me, there's not a single bad track here, but naturally I do prefer some of them over others. With that said, what do you say we dive right into the ranking? As much as I like these tracks, one of them had to end up in last place. I mean, this is no slight to it, but my personal least favourite course of Wave 4 is Bangkok Rush. Despite this placement though, there are still a lot of things I like about it. From the beautiful sunset, to the feeling of rushing along the river rapids, to the representation of all the landmarks like the Grand Palace and the Giant Swing. It is also a very complex track with regards to its route and turns, and while that does make it an interesting drive, to me it sort of works to the track's detriment as well. It just feels like a bit too much, especially when you look at that minimap. Some of the alternate pathways like the stairways and ramps you can ride up also feel too narrow to me, and as such are a bit tricky to drive through, especially at higher speeds. Couple the already confined spaces with some 90-degree turns and it makes getting on and off these paths a little awkward to pull off. This all may seem a bit nitpicky, and to tell the truth, it kind of is. I don't hate this track by any stretch of the imagination, it's just that I prefer the rest of them. In fairness, Wave 4 has only just released, so hey, maybe I'll warm up to Bangkok Rush over time as I get more familiar with the layout. For now though, I'm putting this one in C tier. When you think about the DS tracks that haven't been added to the Booster Course Pass, your mind probably goes to courses like Airship Fortress, Delfino Square, and Luigi's Mansion. But then, out of nowhere, Nintendo decided to drop DS Mario Circuit, which was an interesting move to say the least. Honestly though, I can kinda vibe with it. While Airship Fortress was definitely my favourite from DS and I still would love to see it return, I don't think DS Mario Circuit is a bad course at all. In fact, I'd say it's always been one of the stronger Mario circuits in the series. So, does this remake do it justice? I would say so. I was a little hesitant about the art direction they went with on this one at first, what with it going for a more simplistic look, but to me, the colours really do pop. When you put it side by side with an earlier DLC track like Shroom Ridge, the difference is night and day. As for the layout, the track is mostly similar to its DS iteration, but some changes have been made. For instance, the section after the pipe has been transformed from a generic stretch of road into a fresh new forest biome. During the first two laps, you'll see a Wiggler chilling amongst the trees here, but on the final lap he comes out and walks around the track, making for a fun little hazard. Speaking of which, you've also got the fire piranha plants, which are present towards the start of the track, and is it just me? Or are these guys way more accurate than they used to be? I didn't remember them being much of an obstacle in the DS version, but they always seem to snipe me here, which I quite enjoy. If there is one thing I absolutely adored about the original version though, it was the music. That tune is an earworm, let me tell ya. I find myself humming it all the time, like da 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 da. Yeah, I'll stop. Because of that, I had high expectations for this new remix, but luckily it was music to my ears in every sense of the phrase. The nostalgia hit me like a truck on my first time listening, man. It takes a similar approach to the Shroom Ridge remake, with it using a synth to emulate the old DS vibe, while still having a modern feel to it thanks to the guitar and brass in the background. For being a solid remake with some good changes and a banger of a remix to boot, DS Mario Circuit lands itself comfortably in the B tier. Not too shabby. There are a lot of city tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe now, and for a time, I was worried about that and apprehensive for future waves of the DLC. To me, tracks like Tokyo Blur, London Loop, and Berlin Byways all sort of blend together in my head. I don't feel particularly strongly either way about them, they're just kinda there. Prior to this wave, the only real standout to me was Sydney Sprint, which felt a lot more dynamic than the rest. Naturally for these reasons, I wasn't expecting much going into Amsterdam Drift, but I was pleasantly surprised. It's very visually distinct and definitely has its own identity. You've got a lot of variety in the terrain with the town, the grasslands, and even the windmill gliding section. That part in particular reminds me a little bit of windmill planes from Diddy Kong Racing, and that's always a plus in my book. Then there's the second lap, which plunges you into an underwater section in the form of a canal. Seeing the underwater mechanic being reincorporated into the tracks after seemingly being forgotten in the first couple of waves is very nice, and it's utilised well here, with geysers that you can trick off to reach the surface. I quite like what the final lap does as well, as you end up crossing paths with the oncoming racers, akin to DS Peach Gardens and Luigi Circuit from Double Dash. This is a fun little track with an interesting layout, and for that reason, it earns a respectable B tier in my book. The Riverside Park had the glow-up of the century in this game, with insanely upgraded visuals that rival those of even base game Mario Kart 8. From the jungle theme to the atmospheric lighting that the sunset provides to the brand new cave section, this remake takes what was already a pretty unique track theme in Super Circuit up to the next level. As far as layout goes, it's a mostly faithful recreation of the original when you look at the minimaps side by side, with the exception of a few turns that have been cut out. I personally don't mind this, as it's nowhere near as butchered as Sky Garden, and the changes do help to streamline things a bit. Much like the other GBA remakes, there are a lot of changes in elevation that have been added here to give the course a more dynamic feel than the flat original. Also newly introduced to this track are the Patuis, which are scattered throughout the course. These guys can be hit using shells, which in turn causes them to drop bananas and mushrooms over the course in a similar fashion to the Goombas. They're a pretty neat hazard, although for some reason, the items don't seem to appear in Versus mode. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but perhaps we'll see it patched in a new update. Regardless, I found that the items do very quickly start to litter the track, so it becomes quite chaotic the further you get into it. Overall, with its beautiful graphics, satisfying layout, and a lot of potential for mushroom shortcuts, this track absolutely earns its spot at the top of B tier. I still think that Snowland is my favourite GBA remake in the Booster Course Pass, but this one is a close second. There are just a few more tracks in this wave that I feel surpass it though, hence why it's only ranked 5th place here. Having never played Tour, I had no idea what to expect going into Singapore Speedway, but wow. This track is electric. It's so engaging to race on, and it feels like there's so much cool stuff being thrown at you every step of the way. The first lap has the cannon right at the beginning, the water with the Goombas just chilling there, and the gliding section back down to where the second lap begins. This one essentially acts as a cooldown from the intensity of the first lap and a build up to the spectacle of the third. The final lap immediately thrusts you into overdrive with the conveyor belts to push you along, a big jump over the Art Science Museum, and one more climactic glide before it all wraps up. What I love about these gliding sections in particular is how open they are. In a lot of other Mario Kart 8 tracks, the gliding segments only really serve as a means of bridging a higher part of a track to a lower one without much need for the player to move around. Here, however, you really have to be in control of how you glide, as you need to line yourself up perfectly to go through the boost rings and hit the ramps to trick off. With all the ups and downs, this track almost feels like a roller coaster to race on. Sydney Sprint is still fantastic, but I think I may just have found a new favourite city track here. A well-deserved A tier for Singapore Speedway. You know how the saying goes, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's very much the philosophy that DK Snowboard Cross takes. You can't go wrong with this track, as it was one of the best in Wii and it's still just as iconic here. Sure, they didn't change a whole lot, but I don't think they really needed to. If I were to sum up this course in one word, it would be exhilarating. From the initial cannon shot to the rapid descent to all the mounds of snow to trick off, this one is an absolute blast from start to finish. As we saw with Maple Treeway in Wave 3, the half-pipes have also made their glorious return here, because, let's face it wouldn't be DK Snowboard Cross without them, and it's like they never left. Tricking off them is a lot of fun, and you can sort of ride on one side too, just like in Wii. Couple that with the thick snow and the snowboarding Shy Guys you have to avoid, and you have an incredible ending section to tie the whole course together. The only slight difference I noticed is with the snow mounds. Compared to the Wii version, there are fewer mounds here, but they're a bit taller and thus make for a bumpier ride. What's awesome is that you can still do the double cut from Wii, and I'm so happy that they let you pull this one off. Between this, the Mushroom Gorge Gap Jump and the Snowland Ultra Shortcut, Lakitu in the Booster Course Pass seems a lot more lenient, and that's something I definitely appreciate. It feels so good to be racing on this track again. It's been a long time coming, but absence makes the heart grow fonder, and I can tell you right now that my heart has definitely grown fonder of this track. A-tier material right here, folks. Well, where do you even start with Yoshi's Island? I was incredibly hyped when I saw the trailer for the first time, and boy does it deliver. It feels like a real love letter to fans of the original Yoshi's Island, and is packed to the brim with charm and references. You got Poochie the dog chilling on the mailbox, the stilt guys and Huffin' Puffins walking around the track, and even this dude in the background who is apparently called a Peanuts. The more you know. The starting line is Yoshi's house. You fly through a goal ring at the end, and every single world is represented to some degree. The track is essentially a guided tour of the entire island, starting off in the fields, moving into a forest, before diving underwater and entering a castle. Once you emerge, you scale a volcano, which you then glide over just as it's erupting, which feels so satisfying. It's like walking away from an explosion. That takes you up into the clouds, from which you glide back to safety at the beginning of the course. It really feels like an adventure, and that's a feeling that very few tracks are able to capture. Further adding to the sheer attention to detail here is the fact that the track has a unique starting fanfare, as well as a victory and results theme. Even the coins have a unique sound effect and have Yoshi's face on them. The best part to me though is the question mark cloud, which makes an alternative route appear when you glide into it. It was a seamless way to add in yet another reference to Yoshi's Island, but this time it's one that actually affects the way you play the course. This thing is deceptively hard to hit, but the path that appears is a fitting reward for doing so. Overall, this track shows a similar level of care to that which Hyrule Circuit and Animal Crossing received, but honestly, I think that Yoshi's Island got the best treatment of the three and is a spectacular tribute. It's hard to play this track without a smile on your face, and you just can't put a price on that. For me, it's an S tier. Well, you've probably worked it out by now. My favourite track in Wave 4 is none other than Waluigi Stadium. This marks the first Double Dash course added to the DLC, and man, what a first impression. First of all, can we just take a second to talk about the visuals? I love how this one looks. The shiny mud texture of the road is great to look at, the purple and yellow lighting is really cool and thematically fitting too, and then you've got the excavators in the background to boot. Those are a really nice touch, and act as a sweet callback to Waluigi's Gold Mantis car from Mario Kart DS. I still don't know why they gave that to him. As for gameplay, a lot has been retained from the original, with tons of ramps to trick off, rings of fire to jump through, and half-pipes to ride. The classic mechanical piranha plants have returned as well, albeit in a slightly different arrangement to before. One of them remains in the same position, while the other two have been rearranged. Before, they were positioned in a horizontal fashion, but now they face diagonally towards each other. I do think this looks great visually, but doesn't really add too much to make the track more interesting. What do, however, are the alternative routes that this remake introduced. I think these were implemented in such a creative way. As you drive through the track, you'll notice a couple of extra anti-gravity paths suspended in midair, and to reach these, you actually have to trick off the half-pipes to land on them. This is such a neat idea that, to my knowledge, has never been done in the series before. They're playing around with the idea of half-pipes more than even the game that introduced them did. It's pretty incredible to see. The last path in particular is so fun to take. You sort of cut across the final turn and glide towards the finish line where you can just about snipe a last second victory. To me, these changes genuinely make it feel like this track was made for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe rather than for Mario Kart Tour. It hasn't just been brought back, it's been thoroughly enhanced. Double Dash came back swinging with this one, and I hope we get to see some more GameCube tracks return in the future waves. In my opinion, this is an easy S tier. So there you have it, and that's my ranking of the Wave 4 tracks. I'm personally really impressed with this lineup, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, the fact that we're getting